In the coalition of the willing, there are calls for the President of France, Emmanuel Macron, to lead negotiations with Putin on behalf of Europe, reports The Telegraph. However, when asked if it's time to resume communication with Moscow, the Elysee Palace responded obviously no, according to British journalists.
Mr. Macron has positioned himself as Europe's go-between with Putin since the start of his full-scale invasion. He opted to leave diplomatic channels open with Moscow longer than any of Europe's most ardent supporters of Kyiv, despite harsh criticism for his actions. But he ended any direct contact with the Kremlin when it became obvious to him Putin had no intention of halting his invasion. From the Telegraph publication.
On April 4th, the President of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, met with the military leaders of France and the UK in Kyiv. They discussed plans for developing foreign contingents to Ukraine as part of a ceasefire agreement. After the meeting, Zelensky announced regular meetings of the coalition of the willing at the level of military representatives. He emphasized that the partners already have a good understanding of Ukraine's needs. As for the foreign contingent in Ukraine, the details could be agreed upon within a month, he noted.
I cannot reveal many details yet. This is just the beginning, but the deepest start of this work. We are discussing presence on the ground, in the sky, and at sea, as well as air defense, and some other delicate matters. I think we will hold weekly meetings at the level of our military leaders. The specific locations are being discussed separately.
As noted by the General Staff of the French Armed Forces, the main goal of the visit to Kyiv was to discuss the needs and tasks of Ukraine's defense forces as part of long-term support. France and the UK will closely cooperate within the framework of the international coalition to prevent Russia from launching a new large-scale invasion after the ceasefire. This was stated by Chief of Staff of the French Army, Thierry Bouchard, following his visit to Kyiv.
Strengthening the Ukrainian army is crucial and the first guarantee of the country's security if we want to achieve lasting peace in Ukraine. The dynamics of Franco-British cooperation will continue in future discussions, making an active contribution to the security of the European continent. From the French Armed Forces General Staff Statement on X social network.
On March 27th, during the next meeting of the Coalition of the Willing, the President Macron announced that a Franco-British mission would be sent to Ukraine to work on strengthening the Ukrainian army. At that time, he also mentioned that work on the potential deployment of foreign contingents to Ukraine is ongoing. The negotiations involve the President of Ukraine Zelensky, Secretary General of NATO Mark Rutte, and other European leaders.
The security assurance forces are a French-British proposal. It has been agreed by the UK and France, and it is desired by Ukraine. Several member states have also agreed to join. Compared to a few weeks ago, Europeans have become much more united, bolder, and more determined. Above all, we are all convinced that the long-term security of Europeans is at stake in Ukraine in the coming weeks.
French media reported that after the summit in Paris, Macron insisted that the future contingent, which will serve as a second security element for Ukraine after its armed forces, will not function as peacekeepers. This will be deterrence forces. Reported by Alexandra Zaslavets, Kristina Dombrovska, UATV News. The President of France called on allies to make strategic decisions to defend Europe. He also proposed introducing joint European funding to increase arms purchases and production. Emmanuel Macron is convinced that it will be difficult for Europe to have a unified army. However, he believes it is possible to create shared defense capabilities. Otherwise, he argues, Europe will not be able to become more autonomous.
As Europeans, we must increase our military efforts. We, the French, have a strong army, the most effective in Europe. We will need to strengthen our defense and our security. In the coming weeks, I want to organize a large-scale European funding initiative to increase defense procurement and production.
France must also increase its defense budget share, President Macron is convinced. During a meeting with parliamentary factions and groups, he suggested that the National Assembly, the country's parliament, consider increasing defense spending to 5% of gross domestic product. He reminded them that in the 60s, 70s and 80s, during the Cold War, France had similar levels of defense spending. However, after the fall of the Berlin Wall, investments were reduced. Today, France spends about 2% of its gross domestic product on defense.
The time is coming when we will have to invest even more, both in France and across Europe, to strengthen our defense and security. I'm not sure if 5% is the right figure for France, but in any case, we will have to raise these expenses. I do not rule out launching a savings mechanism, We are entering an era where each of us should ask ourselves, what can we do for the French nation and the Republic? In this sense, such a savings mechanism would be a very good idea.
In recent days, Emmanuel Macron has had numerous conversations with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. The two leaders have coordinated their diplomatic efforts for the immediate future.
During the conversation, the presidents of Ukraine and France shared details of their contacts with other world leaders and coordinated positions, joint plans, and next steps. Volodymyr Zelensky and Emmanuel Macron also discussed in detail the views on security guarantees. From a publication on the website of the Office of the President of Ukraine,
in particular, the leaders discussed preparations for Emmanuel Macron's visit to Washington. According to the French president, he intends to meet with Donald Trump and urge him to be weak in the face of Putin, as this is not in Washington's interest. How can you be authoritative in the face of China then? Macron asked.
He, Macron, will come to the United States to speak for the Europeans and to say that Ukraine's future cannot be decided without them. Benjamin Haddad, the Minister for Europe and Foreign Affairs of France, from a publication in Le Figaro.
The Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, Keir Starmer, is also preparing to visit Washington. Information about the upcoming visits of Macron and Starmer was confirmed by the White House. They stated that the leaders of France and the UK would visit the United States separately, and the dates for their visits have been set.
And next Monday, the President will host France's President Emmanuel Macron. And on Thursday, the UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer will visit the White House as well.
According to The Telegraph, the Prime Minister of the UK will urge Donald Trump to keep American fighter jets and missiles ready in Europe in case Russia violates the terms of any potential ceasefire. Additionally, Starmer is expected to bring the United States a strategy for deploying European troops in Ukraine.
Sir Keir Starmer will present Donald Trump with a plan to send fewer than 30,000 European troops to Ukraine in an attempt to secure American protection for the deployment. The Prime Minister is expected to detail how European forces could police any ceasefire deal brokered by the U.S. President when the pair meet in Washington next week. From a publication in The Telegraph.
The question of a peacekeeping mission in Ukraine is also being considered in Paris. According to Emmanuel Macron, France would likely be willing to send troops to guarantee peace only if it's achieved through negotiations. Reported by Alexandra Zaslavets, Valeria Nikipelova, UATV News.